When you think of ancient South India, you probably picture the Sangam Age, right? And the three great crowns, the Cheras, the Cholas, and the Pandyas. But here's the thing. While two of those kingdoms really built their power on land, one looked to the ocean. They built a global trading empire on something tiny, but incredibly precious. This is the story of the Pandyas, the dynasty whose mastery of the sea often gets a bit overshadowed.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll set the stage and look at all three Tamil crowns together. Then, we'll dive deep into what made the Pandyas so powerful. After that, we'll get into their epic rivalries, the fight for a real empire. We'll also cover the invasion from the north that kind of started their decline. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by talking about why these guys still matter so much today.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the Pandyas, you first have to understand the world they were operating in. Let's take a look at how they stacked up against their very powerful neighbors during the Sangam Age.
And this really lays out the core difference, doesn't it? You've got the Cheras, focusing on that western spice trade, and the Cholas, who built their entire kingdom on those fertile river plains. But then look at the Pandyas. Their capital, Madurai, was basically the command center for an economy built not on land, but on the sea. This focus on maritime trade, all powered by pearls, man, that defined who they were right from the get-go.
So what exactly was this economic engine? Let's zoom in on the power of this Pearl Kingdom, because we're not just talking about funding a kingdom here. We're talking about building an empire that was known and respected all across the ancient world.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How did they get so incredibly wealthy and powerful? What was their secret sauce for putting Madurai on the global map? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was this masterful combination of unique resources and some really, really clever strategy.
Okay, it all kicks off with their world-famous pearl fisheries. The Pandyas had a lock on this amazing resource. And you gotta understand, these pearls weren't just pretty necklaces. They were like a global currency. They fueled this incredibly lucrative trade with empires as far away as Rome. You combine that with their control over regional spices, and boom, you've got a financial powerhouse.
And it's so important to remember the time period for all this. This is all happening during what we call the Sangam Age. We're talking about a roughly 600-year window of incredible cultural and literary explosion. It was really the golden age for these three great Tamil kingdoms, and it's the backdrop for this entire story.
But you know how it goes. When you have that much wealth, conflict is never far behind. The Pandyas weren't just rich merchants. They were fierce warriors who had to constantly fight to protect their dominance over the seas from some very powerful rivals. And their number one rival, without a shadow of a doubt, was the Chola dynasty. This slide just captures that classic clash perfectly. You have the Pandyas, this maritime power fueled by global trade, going head-to-head with the Cholas, a land-based empire built on agriculture. That fundamental difference right there, it sparked centuries of absolutely brutal conflict for control of the Tamil lands.
So, for centuries, all the fighting was pretty much local, between these regional powers. But eventually, a new, completely overwhelming threat started marching down from the north, and it was one that would change the fate of all the southern kingdoms forever.
This timeline really shows you how it all unraveled. You see that revival in the 13th century? That was like one last golden age for them. But the thing is, those constant grinding wars with the Cholas had really taken their toll, just bleeding the kingdom dry. And that weakness, that internal exhaustion, left them wide open for the final blow from the north, the invasion of Malik Kafur from the Delhi Sultanate. And you really need to get this point. Malik Kafur's invasion, this wasn't just another battle. As the slide says, it irrevocably altered the political landscape. It was a cataclysm. It just shattered the old way of doing things and brought the imperial dreams of the Pandyas to a final, violent end. So we've traced their incredible rise and their pretty dramatic fall. Now we have to ask the big question. Why should we care? Why do the Pandyas still matter? Well, for anyone studying Indian history, and especially for those of you prepping for exams like the UPSC, the answer is they matter a lot. Just take a look at this breakdown. It's actually fascinating, because the Pandyas story isn't just one little topic. It's like a thread that's woven through the entire syllabus. You see them pop up in Sangam polity, in Indo-Roman trade, in temple architecture, and, of course, in the huge conflicts of the time. Honestly, if you want to understand South Indian history, you've got to understand the Pandyas. And hey, if you need a quick way to remember all this before an exam, it really doesn't get any simpler. Just 3 steps. Step 1, remember the capital, Madurai. Step 2, associate them with their economy, the pearl trade. And Step 3, identify their decline with Malik Kafur. You lock those 3 points into your brain, and you've basically got the core of their entire story.
So let's end with one last, kind of bigger question to chew on. We know their money came from the sea, right? But how did that maritime power, that constant connection to the rest of the world, actually shape their culture back home? How did it influence their art, their amazing temples, their literature? It's that incredible link between commerce and culture that is the true, lasting legacy of the Pandyas.